Poor old
Problem
Southern.
is when dumb people think they're smart.
Nice to have a new corporate spreadsheet so we could know who's who these days. A lot of new hires.
You're talking about a staff
Yeah,
list?
yeah.
Talk to Dave about that.
I did it last meeting. He may have forgotten. I'll remind him again.
I don't know why. Tell me why you would need to know the names of all the monkeys in the zoo. Like what?
Well, that's right. We're not allowed to talk to him anyway. That's right. Not my circus, not my monkeys, but I know the clowns. Morning, everybody. 10 o'clock. Call the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of August the 7th, 2024 to order. We have a quorum. The chair acknowledges that we're located in the traditional territory of the Latvia people, and the first item of business is the adoption of the public agenda.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? All in favor? That is carried. No petitions or delegations. Adoption of previous meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Anything there? Nothing? All in favor? That's carried. Any business arising? Seeing none. No public considerations, notice of motion, or chair's report. We're down to staff reports. Electoral Area D bulk water usage for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Director Rice?
I just wanted to say thank you for this report. I think when we don't see these numbers very often, it's kind of important to bring them back. Again, it's really important for Area D to understand what their water usage is and the current rate that we're paying, because I always get asked questions on that. So thank you for this report.
Anything further? Director Maloney?
Thank you, Chair. I noticed in this report that this is for the cost of water that is provided for the residents of Area D, which are supplied by the City of Campbell River. And I was just curious if the Director Rice, if you have the numbers, or are they in the public record, the cost of water for the parts of Area D which are supplied by the Comox Valley Regional District?
I don't have the big number, but I do know that the south end of Area D pays far less. They pay half of what we're currently paying the City of Campbell River.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if it would be helpful to have that information also, so that there was more of a comparative option there.
Well, I can tell you that for those that are connected on the Campbell River water system and they have meters, we pay $1.59 per quarter. In contrast, those that are on meters in the south end of Area D pay $26 per month. So again, almost a reflection of half difference. The other aspect that is quite challenging for Area D is even though we are moving to meters, we still have a lot of people that pay a flat rate, and that flat rate is approaching $1,300 a year, and we don't have that comparison with the Black Creek Oyster Bay water system because everybody is on a meter and they're metered.
So will the new water meters, which are going to be installed in Area D, will they support lowering the cost of water to homeowners, do you anticipate?
We'll approach that when we get there, I'm hoping. But what I have found with a lot of water services is that once we start reducing consumption, they'll find a way to put the rates up. So that's quite concerning.
Thanks, and thanks, Chair.
Director Benesh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious, is the unit cost in Area D the same as the unit cost in the city of Campbell River?
No, if I can, I'll take that. The city of Campbell River has a bylaw that all users outside of the city boundary pay 2 times the city rate. So whatever the city rate is, and there's only, to my knowledge, 2 users outside the city, and that would be the Coetzus First Nation and Area D. So it's just double. Their bylaw says you pay twice.
So it could be argued that like Area D is kind of subsidizing part of Campbell River's water supply.
Could be. I mean, we don't have another source, right? So this is a long history that a resident in Area D challenged the ability for the city to charge double the rate. They sued the regional district and the city at the same time, and long story short, it was unsuccessful. That the local government can charge whatever fee they need to recover to provide the service. So then later on, what happened is I think the area director approached the minister and asked the city to justify the rate, and they worked that back and said this is how we came to the 2 times rate. So we don't have a lot of options there, and that bylaw kind of hangs over our head. That agreement is up in October, November, I believe, this year, and we're working with the city staff to try and come to a more favorable number.
Yeah, it seems quite unfair to me.
All right, I'll call the question on receipt. All those in favor? That is carried. Next item of business is Electoral Area D Fire Protection Service costs for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion?
So just one thing I want to add, because I've had discussions with folks at the city, and for any of those listening online, I kind of want to support one of the reasons why the costs are increasing significantly. And so we have an agreement, obviously, for the northern area fire protection through the city of Campbell River. The city has a plan to upgrade Fire Hall number 1 in that. And the estimates on that hall are about 21 million. So who knows where that's going to sit at the end of the day. We don't know how the city is going to finance that hall. They may have enough cash in their pocket to say, hey, we're just going to build it with our money. They may have some reserves. They may go to borrowing. But as we pay about 7% of that fee to the city, we need to have that money available. So let's say it's $21 million. We need to have somewhere between $3 and $4 million to contribute. We need to ramp ourselves up there to get to a position where we either have, let's say, a payment or our lump sum available at the time where that hall is built. So the rates from the city that they give us haven't been going up, but because we have line of sight on we're going to need to have money available for that capital build, we are increasing the rates through the next several years to be at the point where we have that contribution to capital, regardless of how they finance it. Because as we know, regional districts, all local government has to go to the community to get authorization to borrow money. We can't be in a position where we go and say, oh gosh, our portion of this contract is $3 million, we need to borrow this money, and the community says, no, they vote it down. Where would we be? We would be in a really difficult spot. So we are ramping up the rates to meet the expectation of our ability to make that contribution when it is required. And we understand that will be, somewhere maybe in 2026.
Anybody else? Director Rice?
First of all, thank you for the report, and this provides a little bit more clarity on how the numbers are arrived at, which is really good. I do have a supplementary motion to this that I will talk about later. I think the big thing that I'm finding quite challenging is the fact that we have a service agreement that is quite old, and thank you for attaching that service agreement to this report. The date on this service agreement goes back to 1977, and basically this agreement hasn't been looked at in many years, and there was an updated report in September of 2021 that did highlight some of the deficiencies of the current service agreement. The other thing that I do want to point out is that it's great that Campbell River is looking at fire hall replacement, but again, it's quite questionable how that benefits Area D when I take a look at the service model and how they deliver that service. So again, I'll talk more when I bring in the supplementary motion. Thank you.
Anyone else? Director Mooney?
Thank you, and I will admit right now that I did not read the entire service agreement, but I was just, I did read in the report that it's talking about that the service is based on a service area assessment as a ratio to total assessment of the, of Campbell River. And is the funding model built into the agreement, or could it be considered as shifted? Like, I'm not sure when the agreement, if it is up for renegotiation, like as funded through like a number of front doors, for example, versus the ratio or the assessment
Rates,
ratio.
if I may, Mr. Chair, so it is based on assessment. So we take the portion of Northern Area D and bundle it in the assessments, and that comes out to just over 7%, I believe. And that's how, and it is in the service agreement, that's how we make our contribution. However, a new agreement, we could fund any kind of different model. It's anything's available to us, or a lot of things are available, certainly, and that's where we're in discussions with the city on that. Right now, the agreement speaks to an all-in service, so everything it takes the city to provide fire service, and the agreement speaks to an equivalent level of service for Area D as it does the city. So everything it takes the city to do that, we are paying an all-in cost to reflect Area D. So that's the old agreement. What the new agreement will say, time will tell.
All right, on receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. Director Rice?
So I've got a motion that staff prepare a report with options and timelines for updating the 2021 fire service study.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Director Rice?
For those that are not familiar with this report, so this was a comparison of, a review of the Campbell River Fire Service. This was a report that was brought to staff or to the board in September 2021. And at the time that the report was written, it was looking at the cost of the fire service of that day. And the cost in that day was about $490,000. As you know, with this last tax cycle in 2024, we're already sitting, I think it's about $5,000 less than $700,000. And then the forecast is that by 2026, the cost of the service is going to increase to about 1.2 million. What is interesting in the fire service study is that it did some comparison numbers of an actual fire, what it would cost to have an actual fire hall in Area D. And I think that as we start looking at these big numbers of 1.2, it's worthwhile to go back and take a look and get an updated price on what would it cost today for that fire hall, What are the different options? We do have options that could possibly present themselves if we knew better what the numbers were. But I also think the other compelling thing to bring this report back with an update is that one of the recommendations in September of 2021 was to renew this service agreement. They admit that in the report that the service agreement doesn't do Area D too many favors. So it is worthwhile for us to go back and take a look and see, can we get a new agreement in the interim? Thank you.
Anything further? On Director Rice's motion, all those in favor? That is carried. Number 3 is proposed grant in aid service for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Director Vinesh?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One, if we created a grant and aid service that was, let's say, areas B, C, and D, or for example, can we still say, okay, area C is going to put in 40,000, area B is going to put in 30,000, area D is going to put in 25,000. Can we set the level of tax requisition for our individual areas and then spend those still individually the same way we do it now?
Staff?
Well, I guess the short answer is we're not sure. It is possible to have alternative formulas instead of assessed values, for example, or population. The extent to which we might be able to, I'm not going to use the word gerrymander, but to predetermine what areas would pay, we would have to have discussions, I think, with the province to determine whether that would be considered a legitimate approach for such a service.
Okay, thanks. I think that's a key. Oh, go on, Dave.
Yeah, so one thing we can do similar to our constituency that's worked, I think, fairly well, because it may be more complicated trying to create something in the bylaw than assisting with having, let's say, a policy in there. So with the constituency expenses, we all contribute, and you contribute different amounts because it's based on assessment. And we have a policy about kind of withdrawing from that. And then once you get to or exceed that policy, it comes back to the group. So let's say with grant and aid, I think what you could likely do is, let's say some or all of you want to go in, you come up with an amount annually that you wanted to contribute.
Individually?
Yeah, so I think this is possible. Let's say you wanted to contribute $50,000 from Cortez, and that would convert into a requisition per home of whatever. And then that's simple enough, but then it's the extraction part, right? So to make sure you don't extract anything more, we could likely have a policy that supports it, and I would assume the group would respect that. That may be a simpler way to do it because the contributions are uneven, right?
Right.
So I think we could set contribution levels, convert them to requisition levels, and then have a policy that supports how you withdraw. That's likely the easiest thing. So I don't think that's the most difficult part about the grant and aid. I believe we can support that. But it's in what other parameters within the service do we want to define, right? We've taken, as Director Wally knows, we've taken a lot of stabs at a grant and aid service and criteria or limitations of what that are unsuccessfully. So we brought it to the board. We can't take away the board's director's ability to vote on grants and aid, but what we can do is create a different grant and aid for this group. And then you can create whatever parameters you want. And then I think what we just need to know is what are those parameters. I'll give you a couple examples. Is that in the past, the board had said, and help me out if my memory's not correct, the board has said, hey, we want to see a financial statement from these groups. Some groups can provide that and some groups can't. It's too onerous, right? So then we had discussions about whether that needs to stay or not because some of these parameters can eliminate folks from getting a grant and aid. So what do you want to see in terms of those, right? And I don't know if there's there's agreement amongst the group about what those should be or what they should be limited for or how they're presented. So these are the things that.
Now, when it comes to the board, only the participants are gonna vote on it
If we create this
if
service,
we
yeah.
create this service.
Yeah.
And the other thing about extraction is that because every participant is going to have an equal vote on this, they're not going to allow one area to extract more than they put in.
Well, I think there's the technically what folks are able to do and, you know, again, creating this policy that we would respect. And I, again, like the constituency, I don't think we've had trouble with that, the extraction part. So if we're going to have, well, maybe won't. It depends on what the amounts you want. We may have similar contribution amounts. We may have, I don't know, we may have different ones. But that's just that we collect it and shove it in this pot, right?
The other thing to take a look at is the surplus at the end of the year. That
Right.
could be solved by simply each year, each area contributing a different amount.
I agree. I think a lot of it, the easier thing, again, it's based on extraction and if there's deficits or surplus, to deal with that likely in a policy, because I don't know if we can within the bylaw, like, it could be challenging. But I think we can create policy that's fairly simple.
Thank you. Appreciate that from both of you. That definitely makes it easier for me to say yes to this. I think that's a really important thing that we can decide as individual representatives of our area to decide on the tax acquisition amount. And my other question was around, hang on, what was it? It was, the how it comes into play. So because we're basically taking our grant and aid service now that's individual services that the board decides on, and we're looking at putting into a sub-regional service between us. The staff report suggests that it would have to go through a voting process or an alternative approval process. You know, in my mind, we already have this tax acquisition happening. It's not like we're trying to do anything differently. We're just changing the structure that it's within. And I'm wondering if it's possible to move this forward with director assent.
Maybe Tom will correct me, but I don't believe we can, but I have good news for that. So you have it in a pot of money and we're looking to create, let's say, another service, another pot. So I'll use this building as an example. When I came here, we were renters, and I'm just gonna use round figures and say we spent $100,000 on rent. And so negotiate with the seller and bought the place and said, okay, we can buy this place for $100,000 mortgage. Like, let's just buy it. So we needed to borrow that money for it. So we went out on an AAP to borrow the money, but we messaged it and said, look, we need this, but it's not going to cost you anything. It's just kind of a shell game shoving this money over the other. Because net, let's say on Cortez, you were requisitioning $50,000 for that year grant and aid service, and you wanted to put that $50,000 into this sub-regional one. So we'd say, okay, we're creating a new service, so we need to go out, but there is no additional cost. I haven't seen while I've been here when we've messaged it that those have failed. That we make sure we message it, there's no net increase to it.
Yeah, I think
So-
it'd be an easy sell.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because it doesn't seem like it's a controversial thing, and that's usually when you go to a vote or go to alternative approval process.
So technically speaking, I believe setting up this service would require the approval of the electors, unless you were able to convince the minister that, for whatever reason, it's not necessary because of A, B, C, D, whatever. And that's the argument, I think, that I'm not sure whether that would fly, because it is fundamentally different than what the letter of the law states in the Local Government Act. I do agree with the concept of if you're putting in place a service and it's going to cost the population zero, it tends to be an easy sell. So I guess there's a couple of things to think about there.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I don't think in this case, in terms of what I believe your intent is to do, you would have any fear in creating a new service. We've had a lot of success messaging that out when there is no net new cost, and there's lots of times that we do that. So I wouldn't fear that.
I guess my fear is that, an AAP process, 10% of people could kill it, and I'm guessing there's probably 10% of people that might be willing to do that, so I wouldn't want to go with that process. And then a referendum costs something like 60 grand or something, so I hear that we're not sure, so I'd be interested in.
So the other thing is when we would do an AAP for a sub-regional service, it wouldn't just be 10% of Cortez, right?
Right, yeah.
And as the numbers get larger, it's, for lack of a better term, more difficult for the 10% failure. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but when it's known at new cost and you message that out, people tend to be fine with that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't fear that so much.
Okay, thanks. So just a question for staff on next steps here. We have this report. If we wanted to move forward to the next step, what would we need for a motion?
Well, just from my perspective, I think we need to understand what it is that this committee wishes to recommend to the board, and we've made a list of the things that have to be included in a bylaw. So I think constructing the bylaw would be this committee's, I guess, their job to determine who's in, who's out, what are the limits, what are the other parameters we want to include or exclude from this service. Those are the kinds of questions we would have to have some understanding in order to construct a draft bylaw for you to look at.
So would the motion be something like, creating a draft bylaw for us to review and give feedback on?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, and the participants.
We have all the time in the world, to
Yeah.
put it that way.
Okay, I'll happy to make a motion.
We're on
once-
receipt right at the moment.
Once we get past receipt.
Now, I have one more comment. In the future with a different board, different electoral area directors, it is always possible that something like this could go west. And generally, to withdraw from a service, you need the consent of the other participants. Is that possible to have a different arrangement so that one area could withdraw in the future if they so chose without the consent of the other participants?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe it's possible the way you've described it. There could be a review process embedded into the bylaw itself, which could set out some parameters. And it's worth looking into if that's, a desire of the committee.
Yeah.
So just keep this in mind. I appreciate what you're saying, but it still has to be funded, right? So let's say it went pear-shaped, like you said, but the funds from each area, like what we would do is go to each EA director and say, how much do you want to contribute to that? So let's say it went pear-shaped and didn't like it, well, you could contribute nothing.
Yeah.
And then the policy would reflect that. So I think there's a way to kind of protect
Yeah.
yourself against that
Well, that's right.
through the
but-
budget at the end of the day.
Most areas want to have at least something available. So that you would, if you withdrew, you could start your own grant and aid service again, like we have currently.
Right. I think withdrawing could be, I want to contribute nothing to the service. I think that would kind of reflect the same thing, if you will. So I think the contributions are easily controlled through the budget.
Right.
You're in the service, but you contribute $1, right? So,
Yeah.
and then I would anticipate then having a policy that reflects that. And so let's say you had a policy, you wanted to, not you, somebody else comes in and they want to contribute $1 and then withdraw 5,000 for A, B, C. So that grant and aid comes here, we have a policy, staff says, well, the area director contributed $1, the policy says this, likely the other three would vote against it.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't get that. So I think we could build something in that takes care of that stuff that might not be exactly reflected in the bylaw, but in the policy and the voting here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, on receipt, Dr. Mooney?
Thank you, Chair, and I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. It seems like a really worthwhile thing to be spending some time thinking about. In the report, it does mention that the bylaw could include provisions for dealing with dispute resolution and service reviews and withdrawal from the service by a participant. So there is a possibility of that all being built into the bylaw. And I guess what I'm wondering is, it sounded maybe like we need to have some communication with the inspector of municipalities, if I'm getting that right, to find out about the true possibility of dividing the financials up in this service the way that we are sounds like we're heading in that direction. Is that something that we would want to contemplate prior to asking the board for a, because essentially doesn't the board don't we have to make a motion that we want a draft bylaw, and then the board would have to support that before we work on the draft bylaw? And in that case, wouldn't we want to know that first, I guess? Did that make sense?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may respond, any issue that we were not 100% sure of, I think we would be having those discussions with municipal affairs before it comes back to this committee saying, yes, you may, or no, you may not. I think we'd have to have that clarity. And so it'd be an ongoing process of discussion. There are many issues that have been raised today and in the past about grants and aid that are challenging, and we'd certainly want to see to what extent municipal affairs would be supportive of whatever kind of arrangement was being proposed. So I think it would be an ongoing process that we would be touching base with the province over this.
If I could just ask a follow-up with that, with Mr. Yates, is that, are you suggesting that the ongoing process would be during the creation of a bylaw or prior to?
Perhaps both.
Director Rice. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say, I don't anticipate there's really a challenge of municipal affairs. Again, as long as you go through process and identify to people what they're going to be taxed, let's say in this one, it's no net new, they don't really care how you're going to extract it, right? So if you're going to requisition money and you're going to follow the rule of order, they're fine with it. I think our internal process would be how you extract the money, because you can contribute that, but now you would technically have the ability to extract more than you've contributed. But we can defend against that in, again, having policy. I come here and say, Director Mulroney contributed 1,000, she wants to take 10,000 out. If you want to okay that, that's up to you. And that's internally how we can sort that out. That's not difficult. And if you want to do that, then go for it, right? It's just policy, you can override that. But municipal affairs is not going to care about that.
Director Rice is next.
Thank you, Chair. This all sounds really good. My only concern is, is that with the current grants and aids that we have, I mean, the directors have a lot of flexibility at tax time to take a look at that. So my concern would be having the flexibility built into this where at tax time we could say, well, we still have a fair surplus sitting there, so I don't want to contribute anything this year.
Yeah, and we can do that. I think we do that currently. I think what we're looking to do is to combine what you're currently doing into an EA service that, for lack of a better term, bypasses the board. So it would continue with that flexibility. You may have, let's say, a $50,000 number that you want to maintain in that. Maybe one year you didn't spend very much, so it comes budget time and you're saying, well, I'm just going to maintain the 50, so I only need to add 10. And Cortez needs to add 20. That part's fine. That's just reflected in the requisition, and that you maintain those levels and the flexibility in there. Because even with this policy, we're still going to go to each one of you and say, okay, this is what your number is, this is what you spent. Do you want to top it up? Do you want to go higher? That's not going to change. We, in the new service, I would suggest then you have a requisition level that mirrors that, so you're no net new, and you can be true to that. And that gives you the ability to stay where you are, top up as much or as little as you want to that amount, and then we create policy on extraction.
I have a question around the vote. Is it possible to work in, have a weighted vote process? So if we're looking at a grant and aid from Area D, then the Area D director would have 2 votes or 3 votes kind of thing. Is that possible? No, it's not. I'm seeing heads being shaken.
The short answer would be yes. And that is actually the default for operating any service is weighted voting. So the bylaw, if you didn't want that, the bylaw would have to specify otherwise. For example, no director has more than one vote, for example.
So we could technically say that the director whose grant and aid is being looked at has 3 votes?
No.
So that, no.
No.
Even though Tom wants to
This is
give
the
you the
ger-
answer,
the
the answer is
gerrymandering I was
no.
referring
Yeah. Yes, no. And like weighted vote only happens, there's not very many instances where you get the weighted vote. Now, even at the end of the day, when this is all added into the budget, EA votes aside, the financial, the budget vote is a weighted vote. So, the irony about that, I suppose, is you create your own service, you fund it, but the group at the end of the day has a net weighted vote on that. But the short answer is no.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I'm prepared to make a motion to move forward.
After receipt. All right, then on receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. Director Benish.
I'll move that staff prepare a draft bylaw for a grant and aid service for electoral areas A, B, C, and D, and come back to EASC for review.
Second.
All right, any discussion on that by anyone? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, Duncan Bay Area Fire Protection Service for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Might just ask staff on this one before we get to the recommended motion here. The cost of a new fire hall in Campbell River, does that affect this service as well or not?
Well, again, I'm going to say yes and no. I mean, they're providing us an all-in cost to provide the service. Technically speaking, they haven't dissected that and said you're that, but probably yes. I mean,
That's what I'm thinking. So this could escalate the cost that we had told the constituents considerably?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, the price that was quoted for providing the service to the residents in the area, I think it's around $10,000 a year. The city has said we would honor that for a 5-year period, subject to COLA. So if there was a 2% per year, whatever, that would be included. We have not had discussions, as far as I'm aware, Sean, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, around long-term thinking in terms of providing rates similar to what other areas might pay for fire protection. This was always, from the beginning, considered a flat rate, all-in kind of proposal. I think the city was looking to gain some benefits as well to do with their dispatching and all the rest of it. But maybe, Sean, would you say that's fair enough?
I just want to make one point, though. So we could not increase it, regardless of what the Campbell River did. We signed an agreement for, let's say, 5 years, and that's what we're going to pay.
Is that the term of the contract, 5 years?
Yeah. So there is no ability to go beyond that. So let's say at the end of the 5 years, Campbell River said, geez, the cost is going to be this. We would have to go to the constituents and say, okay, that
Yeah,
cost.
we don't have to renew the contract.
No.
Okay.
And we have no ability to charge them more. If Campbell River said it was triple, we'd say, okay, well, that's great. We'll go back to the residents and say, are they still in? If they said no, then we say either you continue to the current rate or we just don't renew a contract.
Right, got it. That's good. Anything further? Sean, did you have something to add?
I'll just echo and to tell them, yes, we're holding the city to their fixed rate on this one for the 5 years.
Thank you. On receipt, anything? All those in favor? That's carried. And Director Winnie, motion, please.
I will move that the committee recommend that the regional district engage with affected property owners in the Duncan Bay area to determine whether the new requirements of the city for providing fire protection services are supported by affected property owners.
Second.
And that's option C. Discussion?
Yes.
That's good for me. All those in favor? And that is carried. Wood debris removal service, Electoral B, C, and D.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion?
Unless Sean wants to speak to this for us?
If it would be helpful for the committee, I can offer the historical context on this service, as three of you weren't in office when we started.
Go ahead.
I'll take that awkward silence as a yes. So since 2016, the regional district has been going after Fire Smart grants to promote wildfire risk reduction activities through the UBCM. These grants generally change every year or two in the amount that's available, the structure, the eligible activities. In 2020, we were in the process of updating 12 different community wildfire protection plans at a regional level. That project was just about finished off when, around in April, the province put in a Category 2 burning ban. This really concerned residents on Quadra and Cortez Island, as they are used to open burning and disposing of their yard debris that way, and the province had never put in a Category 2 open burning ban until May long weekend. Like that was the province really setting up the residents of burn all your debris in early spring. After May long weekend is when that burning ban will come in place. The province threw in that burning ban earlier in 2020 because of the worry about smoke exacerbating respiratory illness, as which COVID-19 was spreading at the time, and there was no vaccine. So we found a pot of money left over in that 2020 grant, offered it this wood chipping service to Quadra and Cortez Island as a way of, we understand your concern, we understand that you have these wood piles piled up, you're concerned about all this fuel in one place, and without any warning, the province said, well, now you can't burn anymore. The service was successful. We got a lot of positive feedback from the residents of those islands, so looking at the grant next year, well, let's try it again and offer it for all electoral areas. Once again, great feedback from the residents and the successful part of it. What started to irk some of the residents on Quadra and Cortez, both the first year and the second year, was that they couldn't take their wood chips back. The Fire Smart grant was very stern on they needed to be disposed of at a proper recycle or disposal facility, the dump in Campbell River or Pacific Wood Waste. So we did the service again in 2021, bringing all the chips back from Cortez all the way back to Campbell River. Managed to work with the UBCM and the province to come up with a medium ground of, if we can find sites locally on those islands that we can dispose of the chips that are outside of the Fire Smart 100 meter zone 3, and they will sit for a couple years and they'll compost into non-flammable material. They would let us roll with that, so we would accept applications from community organizations. Those would come before the board for approval of who would, store the wood chips. We'd bring that back to UBCM. Are these disposal sites okay? They would say yes or no, and then we would offer the service again in 2022. Cost, even with the disposal sites, we found that in Area C, the cost of offering the service skyrocketed in 2022 for a variety of reasons. Costs in Cortez and the rest and Area D and A remain pretty consistent, and that really led us to, okay, this is popular, it's grown. If we're going to offer this again going forward, we need to do it in some sort of cost predictable way under the grant. And so that report went to for board early this year, proposing options that we could investigate, a fixed amount, only certain neighborhoods, all these possible options. And then a month or two later, that's when the East asked us to look into doing this locally through just taxation, where we wouldn't be reliant on the grants to offer the service. And now here we are. And so the costs that are estimated in this, the assumptions that I made were the committee wanted to see this service offered the way it was in the past, with unlimited amount of woody debris at the end of all road accessible driveways, that the residents could keep the chips if they chose to do so, because offering it under our local taxation, we wouldn't be adherent to those Fire Smart standards. And where I came up with the numbers is I just took the highest amount that we've ever been charged for each electoral area when local disposal was an option, because that's all the historic costs that we have on this. Of course, with any service, it's all dependent on participation. So.
Thank you. I'll just make one comment here. When I worked for Mac and Blow, all our industrial residue from logging, we piled, but the government would only let us burn it during the wettest time of year. So we just covered the piles with plastic. And then in the snowstorm, they'll go like crazy. So that's what I do at home. I just put a piece of plastic over a big pile and light it up in the wintertime. So that can alleviate some of your problems. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One is, let's say we get Fire Smart grant that covers 3/4 of the cost. The other quarter is covered by tax requisition. You're saying that because we have the service, all of the chips could stay in, even if 3/4 of them are being covered by the grant?
Sorry, no, that's not what I'm saying. Any grant money that's still going to be used for the wood chipping service would have to adhere to the Fire Smart guidelines.
Okay, so if we'd still be, if we're looking still to have this mostly covered by grants, most of it still wouldn't be able to stay on the island.
We are still able to keep the chips on island, provided we can come up with local disposal spots that have been approved by UBCM and meet their standards. So in the past, Rainbow Ridge used it for some of their trails. Linnea Farm used it for their ecosystem restoration project. How guaranteed are those spots going forward? We don't know. It's an unknown.
Okay, thanks for that. The other question, or I guess comment I have is, this really for me falls under climate resiliency and us, preparing our communities and helping people get set up for success in the case of a wildfire. And I'm interested in, expanding certainly the name of this service and the intention of it to be more around climate resiliency. So it could include wood debris removal, but it could also include other potential climate resiliency projects. Just wondering input from other directors around the table and staff as well.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I did notice in the report that if we moved the motion that is included, that the report would include ways, it says that a service could align with broader regional initiatives to mitigate wildfire and other environmental concerns. So that was actually one of my questions, kind of related to what Director Vanesh is saying. I was wondering if, from a staff perspective, it would be helpful if that was included in the motion to ensure that those other future potentialities are captured, or if that's sort of already planned to be included.
Personally, I would say if it's included in the motion, that's be helpful, because that's the intent of wanting to maybe do it a little greater than just wood chipping. So that would kind of be clear direction, I would say, if that's what the committee's desire to it.
Director Rice?
Thank you, Chair. When I look at the different options there, I'm still not clear. Is this a service with all three of us in, or is this three separate services?
The intent is, I believe, to have everyone participate in it. But, I mean, if it's the desire, like, let's say you just wanted a wood chipping service and you didn't want climate resiliency in there, it could be a service. What we need, or what we want, I guess, is it's a popular service that's out there, used heavily by the folks. It has some limitations based on the funding, what we can do. And also the funding isn't always guaranteed. So do we want to maintain it? And if we want to maintain it, we got to have some money. And if we need some money, we want to have service. So either or, if it's something that you feel you want to do just for Area D, we can do that, or we can do sub-regional, and we can make that more inclusive.
Okay, and I think that's my preference. I mean, most people that talk to me about this just simply refer to it as being wood chipping, and why don't we have this service in the community? So that would be my preference, is to go single ourselves.
Right. Just for my clarity, Sean, do you make the 4 different applications for wood chipping grants?
The current model, Dave, is we're eligible to a certain amount of base funding and then 50,000 per electoral area.
Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Koopman, could you confirm for me? I recall there's a year that you said that there won't be any wood chipping until, and I feel like it was maybe 2027 or 2028 or something like that, because there is some sort of plan to sort of, the funding that is for wildfire resilience does need to be spread around many different projects, and helping neighborhoods clear up the debris in their backyards is really only one small piece of that.
Right, exactly. So through the chair, currently our, the grant application that our wildfire risk reduction coordinator is working on, it doesn't have wood chips budgeted in for it. That application went before the committee, I believe it was in November, and approved, just in the process of being submitted now. Because exactly, each community wildfire resiliency plan has between 30 to 45 recommendations, and the intent of this funding stream is to have us take a holistic approach and not just throwing 50 grand at wood chipping year after year after year.
On receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting you, John, but I'll move that the committee recommend that the regional district establish a locally financed wood debris removal service for electoral area D and a climate resiliency service that includes wood debris removal for areas B and C.
Second.
May I ask a question, Chair? It's just a little different than the recommended motion in the report that was talking about the feasibility of establishing a service, which I had questions about because I wasn't sure if that would be funded out of the feasibility funding from each EA, because it is recommending that there's a feasibility study maybe, or maybe I'm understanding that incorrectly. Do you have any thought on that, Mr. Leach?
I'm just looking for the word feasibility. I don't think this falls under a feasibility study. It's something that we've done, so we're familiar with it. It has two things that I think inhibits us, is one, guaranteed funding, and two, flexibility of what we do with it. And then when we look at, broadening it for B and C, I think when we bring the potential service bylaw forward, you can include the things for us that you believe you want. Like, hard to do a feasibility study on, what would that be, right? I don't think it's likely necessary. It's more the ideas that you have and how much you're willing to fund that, and given some flexibility within that service. So you have something, I'm sure, in your minds. So when we bring that for discussion, we make sure the service can provide for those things, and then you determine the amount of money that you'd be willing to support for that. So that's how I see that.
Mr. Yates?
The motion that Director Rice or Director Bonish gave was clear to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to clarify, I may have misunderstood the question entirely, but the matter of feasibility studies, if a service moves ahead, in this case, whether it's separate for Area D or not or whatever, then there's going to have to be a process that's going to cost some money to go through involving the electors. If at the end of the day the process fails, then the feasibility study reserve fund is going to pick up the cost of doing that. Just so we're clear on that. If there's no service from which to draw the funds necessary for its creation, it has to be picked up by the feasibility study reserve fund. So just so we're clear on that point.
So in this particular case, each electoral area has its own individual feasibility study funds. So how would it be extracted if there's three groups in there?
Well,
We'd figure it out.
on this, if I may, listening to the motion discussion, I don't think there's a feasibility study to be had.
Not unless it failed.
Well,
And then even then.
there's no study to be had.
Yeah, I
I think
understand.
we understand wood chipping, and I think the director's input on the climate resiliency, I don't think we need to
That's
do it.
administration.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, gotcha. All right, did we call the question on that one?
I don't know.
All right, let's call the question on the motion. All those in favor? And that is carried.
Just a comment before we move on to the next one, just because I have it in my mind, and we'll chat, over lunch. But the notion that these grants are declining or not guaranteed, or who knows, moving forward, might be a topic for a meeting at UBCM. I mean, wildfires is a hot topic. It surprises me that funding may be eliminated or declining. I think this is something that enhances the prevention of wildfires, so I would put it on a UBCM list meeting.
Thank you. All right, number 6, Cedar Creek Upper Campbell Lake electrification for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Call the question on receipt. All those in favor? That's carried. And then item B, Director Rice.
Like to move item B, that the committee recommend that the regional district sponsor a public information meeting to meet with the Cedar Creek and Upper Campbell Lake residents and property owners regarding the proposal to bring electrification to the community.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? In favor, Director Mooney?
Oh, yes.
Okay, that's carried, thank you. Number 7, Cortez Island open burning restrictions for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
Just for clarification here, we've just eliminated the sections as recommended by Director Von Esch.
Thank you. I was just going to, I don't know if it has to be amended in the actual motion here, because the current draft has number 5 and 6 there with the word deleted. So I just want to be really clear that it's those areas, those things are out without the words deleted.
Anything further?
No, that's
Okay.
correct, yeah.
All right, on receipt then, all those in favor? Carried. And item B, Director Vanesh.
That I move that the committee recommend that the proposed open burning bylaw for the Cortez Island Fire Protection Service, as attached in the August 1st, 2024 report from the Chief Administration Officer, with the exception of removing 5 and 6 completely from it, be forwarded to the board for further consideration.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Fire Safety Act, legislative requirements for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion?
And I think Sean can speak to this for us.
So through the chair to the committee, not even a week ago, the province has put the new Fire Safety Act into effect. This will require the regional district to establish a process for conducting fire inspections and fire investigations on all public buildings throughout the regional district. There's a couple bullet points in the report that list some more details on that. And so the motion is for us to bring a further report back to the committee on the options of what that could look like and how we can accomplish this new regulatory requirement.
Again, just for discussion purposes, I mean, I'm writing this on every report, it seems. I would say this is another meeting at UBCM that would be interested in, because as you can see and will see when Mr. Koopman brings something back forward, this is more requirements on mostly the electoral areas, because the munis have to do this stuff anyways, which is going to, big surprise, translate into more cost, because somehow we have to do these. And where is the funding to support this?
I have a question. So on publicly owned buildings, does that mean that the SRD has to own them? Or is it, like the Linnea Farm Education Center, which is used by the public, but it's not owned by the public?
All publicly owned buildings on electoral area lands, so excluding municipalities, as municipalities have always had to undertake this requirement. This excludes First Nations, which is federally owned land. But yes, Linnea Farm would qualify. Currently, this is only on a reactive basis, so a complaint has to be filed or at the request of the owner and operator.
Thanks for clarifying.
Director Mooney?
Like schools are publicly owned?
Correct.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of like how many, there doesn't seem like there's a lot of publicly owned buildings in the EAs.
Resorts?
Publicly owned, doesn't,
Sorry, not publicly owned, so buildings that the public are invited to access. Hotels, motels, resorts, grocery stores.
Yeah, from my
commercial buildings.
From my perspective, this has obviously the potential, like it's another layer of requirement, whether it's on complaint-based, look at complaints all the time, this stuff could happen frequently, there's going to be a cost. And as you can imagine, that when these buildings or facilities are inspected, there's likely going to be a cost related to that. So where's the money coming from? Right? It's convenient and easy to download this and make this requirement on us.
This is
but
huge.
How, like, this is just more requisition that's gonna have to be, and again, I would add that to a UBCM list.
How about bed and breakfast and short-term rentals and those things?
Correct. And so through the committee, the Office of the Fire Commissioner is giving us a good gracious period on this. So we do have to establish our own mechanism. We have to identify who are our representatives that are trained to do that. But the Office of the Fire Commissioner will undertake these inspections and investigations at our request for free. The training is going to be free, so we can continue to lean on the OFC. How much we want to rely on that into the far future, that is a question. But right now, there's not an incredible amount of additional costs, but how long will the province continue to offer the service of the Office of the Fire Commissioner for free?
How about the local fire chiefs? Are they going to be involved in this?
To the chair, that is one potential option.
That,
Director Mooney?
thank you. That was actually my next question, because the fire services among the electoral areas are quite diverse. And Quad Island has an independent improvement district, and, you know, Area D has 2 separate fire departments that serve the electoral area. So I was wondering if you or SRD Emergency Services has had consultation on this topic with the fire chiefs of the electoral areas, and have you received any feedback through those conversations?
Yeah, through the chair. So this is 8 years in the making. This isn't a sudden surprise on us. The fire chiefs have known that it's coming. We've had conversations on it throughout the year. So Quad Island is an improvement district as a completely separate fire service. They can remain independent under the Act. They don't have to use the regional district's inspectors. They can continue to just liaise with the Office of the Fire Commissioner themselves. Some fire departments have their fire chiefs perform this service. Some municipalities don't have the in-house expertise, so they use consultants. The city of Campbell River has staff positions specifically devoted to this. So there's different models and ways that this service could be offered, and that's what the follow-up report's going to offer you.
Lots more details in the report to come.
Is it appropriate for me to ask this, that I'm just not sure, but I was wondering about when we recommend that a further report be prepared, that there is consultation with the fire chief serving the electoral areas as a part of that report. Does that sound reasonable to anybody?
I would say just Sean fully understands the impact of it, and I think that he will bring everything he needs to in order to provide you the appropriate information.
That consultation already started last Thursday.
So it'll be included in the report? Okay.
On receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. Have a motion. Director Mooney, do you want to make it?
Sure. I'll move that the committee recommend that a further report be prepared to examine options for meeting the requirements of the Fire Safety Act in consultation with the fire chief serving the electoral areas.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Number 9, Wild Safe BC Educational Program for receipt.
Move receipt.
Just one comment.
Got a seconder first?
Oh, second, yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Vinesh.
Just one comment on the upcoming motion after receive, that I'd like Area B included as well.
Okay. Anything further, staff?
Just that, we've looked into the program. There's definitely the opportunity to partner and access funding for the program. The opportunity for 2024 is coming on, but certainly, I hate to say this, but January isn't going to come up that far in the future. So included a recommendation that we make application for the program in the January intake. That way we can include it in the budget. Certainly, and if you want to add Area B to that, we can do that as well.
Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really thankful for the speed of this report, so thanks for that. I do have a couple of questions. The report mentions that the Wild Safe BC Community Program application process is competitive, and applicants can strengthen their application in a number of ways, including combining with neighboring communities. And it's great that Area B is interested in joining, so that was really my question, is partnering with other electoral areas, would that sort of be what this report is indicating, would be strengthening an application?
I think so. I mean, I think the province is always looking for, bang for their buck. So if you can partner with multiple communities, First Nations, whatever that is, it always helps the applications. So.
Okay. And then my other question, thank you for that, was that The report also mentions the benefits of providing other supports to the local coordinator, such as providing office space or a mobile phone or storage area for materials or ability to make photocopies. And I was curious if the SRD is in a place where any of those could be realized.
Well, I think what that said is in the funding application, you can make requests for funding to provide that additional support, but we can also, in the amount of money that you, let's say, allocate in the budget for, can accommodate that as well. So we could do two things. We could put an amount that you know would help support that, and at the same time, we could request that in the funding application. Should we not be successful, you've still got a backup in providing some financial support to that.
Okay, and if I may have one more question, Chair? Thank you. My reading of the report identified that hosting wildlife working group meetings is a way to strengthen an application. And on Quadra, there are two groups that are already planning a meeting like this, and I've offered to help them organize it in the fall. Would it be beneficial to having had that meeting prior to the application being submitted, or would the WildSafe organization want to be involved in organizing it?
I don't know the answer, but I can't imagine it would hurt, right? So, just think of it as a competitive process, and the more organized and structured communities are, I think that's just going to add to your level of success in an application. It certainly can't hurt.
Thank you.
On receipt then, Dr. Vinesh, have you got a comment? Yes, microphone. Nothing further? Then on receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. Motion?
I'll move that an application for the WildSafe Community Program be submitted for electoral areas B, Cortez Island, and electoral area C, Discovery Island's mainland inlets for the January 2025 intake.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? You got more discussion?
I just had a question because I recalled that when we were discussing this at our last Electoral Area Services Committee meeting, Director Rice had indicated that he may be interested because he was talking about bears in his neighborhoods, but.
No, I think I'll wait and see how you guys do.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. Call the question and all those in favor? And that is carried. Number 10, request for financial assistance, electoral area C for receipt.
Move receipt of the report.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. And the recommendation, Director Mawini.
Would you like me to read them all out?
Sure.
Yes,
Put 'em on
okay.
the record.
I would like to move that the committee recommend the board approve grants and aid to be paid from the Electoral Area C Grant and Aid budget as follows. $2,500 to the Quadra Island Foundation to assist with costs associated with data collection and development of a vital signs report for Quadra Island, and $1,500 to the Quadra Island Conservancy and Stewardship Society to assist 2024 liability and insurance costs, and $1,500 to the Quadra Concerts, to assist with 2024 administration and insurance costs.
You changed the amount there from the recommendation.
Okay, sorry. $1,000 to the Quadra Concerts to assist with 2024 administration and insurance costs.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? Do you have a comment, Director Rice?
It does say here that it's just 2023, not 2024.
Yeah, so I think that I said 2024 out loud because the application from them indicates that it's for their 2024 season, or sorry, their 2024 season, which starts in September and goes in actually until 2025. So
Okay.
that was my understanding when I read it.
Thank you. On the motion then, all those in favor? It's carried. Bylaws, number 574, desolation sale and bulk water regulation for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Director Mawini?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to staff for the report. I'm really happy to see this here. I do have a question, and it's really, I probably should have asked it last month. It's about the definition of bulk water sales. It's the same that's included in the Quadra Island zoning bylaw, which we will be discussing at a public hearing in September. I was just hoping staff could provide an explanation of the additional phrasing added to the definition, the part about excluding the receipt of supplemental water by parcels to enable private domestic, agricultural, commercial, or industrial consumption as permitted by zoning. I was curious if the language came from another bylaw or has had the benefit of a legal opinion. In particular, I guess I would be curious about the industrial consumption being included.
Through the chair, the intent was that it would be the same definition or thereabouts to it, so there is no special rationale for inclusion of that piece. Sorry,
Whatever.
through to Tom, if that language came from the previous bylaw. They're prepared by corporate services, so I'm not certain.
I was just gonna say, whatever water is consumed on Quadra stays on Quadra, right?
So, Mr. Chairman, the wording, as far as I understand it, is the same as other similar bylaws. I don't know the background as to why the exemptions are worded the way they are, whether that came originally from conversations with legal counsel. I think that would be a planning thing. I don't really know the answer to the question, if I understand the question correctly. I don't know where that language has come from.
There is no legal opinion on this bylaw, no.
So
Do you have an issue with the wording?
I guess I was just questioning or wondering about including the industrial consumption, just because it felt like potentially that's the thing which the bylaw is attempting to create a shield from. And the previous draft bylaw, when we went to the public information meeting in February, because this is essentially the same language as is in the Quadra Island zoning draft bylaw. There wasn't an exception for water that was being shared with other properties, and planning updated it to include this. And I totally am happy and grateful that they did do that, and it, enabling private domestic agricultural commercial consumption as permitted by zoning. I was just mostly curious about adding the term industrial in there.
I was just gonna say, though, that whatever water industry uses on Quadra, it doesn't go anywhere, it's still on Quadra. After it's used, it goes back in the ground.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Call the question then. All those in favor? That's carried. Got a motion?
Sure. I will move that the committee recommend that bylaw number 574 be forwarded to the board for first and second readings, and that a public hearing be held at a date and time to be determined.
Second.
All those in favor? That is carried. Director's reports, housing and potential crown land. Director Mooney.
Move receipt of the report.
Second.
Like to speak about it?
Sure. I hope that you had a chance to read my short report that's attached to the agenda. I've been attending meetings of the Discovery Islands Housing Society in a resource capacity, and it was through these meetings that discussions about accessing Crown land began. The Discovery Islands Affordable Housing Society did approach School District 72 about one particular parcel, and the response was not particularly positive. However, since then, during an online meeting, Lisa Helps, who's the lead of BC Builds, indicated the province is interested in supporting utilizing Crown land for housing. And I think that the SRD's regional housing service would provide solid, stable, long-term responsibility and support. And the SRD working together with the school district and the province may be the right mix to move forward on potentially freeing up underused provincial resources in support of a healthier, better housed community.
On receipt, all those in favor? Carried. And a motion, Director Mooney, perhaps?
Yes.
Oh, did you have a comment on?
I just had a comment. This, at the very first meeting that we had with SD 72, this was an item that was discussed. And they were pretty adamant that they're not prepared to give up at this point in time. So my question is, instead of writing a letter, why don't we just wait until, I mean, that committee is probably going to be meeting at the end of September or the first week of October, somewhere in there, and approach them again and just simply ask the question.
I think that was kind of the intent, that we made a motion and it gave them a little heads up for that, because yeah, we are intending to make this an item on the school liaison committee for October. And we met with their controller, and it was just kind of a way to give us kind of a list of properties that we could discuss potentially, because they have a bit of a potpourri of different ownership situations with properties. Some they own, some they have license of occupation, and depending on what the property is, their motivation may be higher or lower to engage them. So I think what this motion was to kind of write them and say, what properties do you actually have, and then to put that for discussion on the school liaison committee discussion.
Justin Winnie?
Thank you, Mr. Leach. Is there any other further comments before I make my motion?
You may.
I guess my last comment is that, I'm certainly interested in electoral area B. I think there's only one property on Cortez, but I'm not 100% sure. So if you want to include electoral area B, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Whereas there are significant housing needs in areas B and C, we resolve to ask School District 72 for a list of properties within Electoral's areas B and C, which the school district owns or holds license of occupation or rights of access.
This is a motion.
Oh, yeah.
I move that. Okay. That usually precedes the motion. I got a seconder?
I did say.
Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. No new business, no addendum, no closed, motion for termination.
I'll move that the August 7th, 2024 regular meeting of the East Committee be terminated.
Second.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everybody.